Hey, good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. We are coming to you virtually this evening, the Tacoma Park City Council. In light of the snow and ice and in an abundance of caution, we're going to be working remotely tonight. But I would like to call tonight's meeting to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Searcy,
Here.
Councilmember Ladman. You're muted, Councilmember. Councilmember Ladman. Councilmember Dabala.
I'm here.
Okay. Councilmember Schlegel.
Here.
Councilmember Gilbert.
Here.
Councilmember Honzak.
Present.
Councilmember Wesselek.
Here.
Wonderful. And we see Councilmember Landman, and we're just gonna have her work through some of those tech issues. So this evening we have a few items on the agenda. The first item is a legislative update from our legislative advocate, Ann Seacott, who will be catching us up on all of the things that are happening in Annapolis. We will then have a presentation from our consultant Raf Tellis on the Financial Sustainability Report Phase 2. We will then have a voting session, the first reading ordinance approving the FY26 budget amendment number 3, and a work session code amendment to expand the homeowner property tax credit program. On tomorrow, January the 29th, the council will meet in a closed session at 6 p.m. to vote. It will be a remote meeting. The meeting will be closed pursuant to Maryland Code General Provision Articles 3-305B1II to discuss personnel matters that affect one or more specific individuals, and or 3-305B7 to consult with legal counsel to obtain advice regarding the audit related to Cooper v. City of Tacoma Park.
Mayor Searcy? Mayor Searcy, may I be recognized? Yes. Is this the appropriate time to make a motion to introduce an item for next week's agenda?
No, it is not, because that item would require a vote. So once I've read through the rolling agenda and we get to the point where we're doing city business, then you can make your motion, and then we will move forward from there.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So that is the closed session tomorrow. On Wednesday, February the 4th, the City Council will meet at its regular time of 7:30 p.m. The first item will be the legislative update, and Seacott, legislative advocate, will present. We will have 2 voting items that evening. The first is the second reading ordinance approving the FY26 budget amendment number 3. The next item is a resolution affirming support for employee access to stress management and peer support services without fear of retaliation. We'll then have a number of work sessions that evening. So it's going to be a long night. The first is the tenant protections overview and discussion, planning for the New Hampshire Avenue Recreation Center redevelopment, proposed amendments to the Tacoma Park Code Chapter 14.12, the noise ordinance, and then the draft resolution follow-up to the Council Compensation Committee recommendations. On Wednesday, February the 11th, the council will meet at its regular time of 7:30. And then we will have, again, a legislative update from Ann Seacott, our legislative advocate, and then a presentation, a quarterly financial report for the second quarter, October to December 2025. And then a voting session, the first reading ordinance amending the Tacoma Park Code to expand the homeowner property tax credit program. And then we will have two items during the 2 work sessions that evening. The first is the resolution updating the status of recommendations to the council by the Task Force to Reimagine Public Safety. And the second is the scope and process for carrying out the removal of the unlawful discriminatory restricted covenants. And so with that, we are going to move to our first item on the agenda, which I believe is our legislative update from Ann Seacott.
Mayor Searcy, at what point is it that I would introduce this voting item?
It is when we are doing business. So it can be once we've gotten through
Okay.
either through a voting session or during the work session, but it would not necessarily be during a time before we've actually entered into discussion of voting items or work sessions.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Annapolis in the snow and ice, where they actually didn't hold session on Monday, which is not typical. They held some hearings virtually, but they didn't gather in session, and I think that was largely out of respect for staff as well. So everybody had some difficulty. But things are rolling again, and things are moving quickly on a couple of priority items for the city. The House and Senate are moving very fast on one of the immigration bills. The bill to prohibit agreements with ICE, the 287G program, it passed the Senate committee that Senator Smith chairs. It passed last night, and just, I don't know, an hour or so ago, the House Judiciary Committee, where Delegate Moon sits, passed the same legislation to prohibit the 287G agreements. So those bills are moving to the floor. I'm sure there will be very lengthy debates. The Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee also passed the prohibition on face coverings for federal agents, or all agents, really. So the House hasn't taken that up yet, but those bills will be on the floor. And so for the next few days, we will hear a lot about that. The other thing we're going to hear a lot about is redistricting. The committee in the House passed that bill. It is on the floor. That will also be potentially a couple of days worth of debate on the House floor about a new district map. So lots of things you're going to hear about in the news. Wanted to mention that on the budget front, the governor introduced his budget last week. Looking at it, and with a lot of help from the folks at MML, it's a budget that tries to deal with a $1.5 billion shortfall with a lot of fund shifting, and some of that is going to hurt some folks. It's all temporary. There is some shifting of costs of things to the counties. So no sort of direct impact to municipalities in some kind of cut, like, for example, highway user revenues is flat. But I think there is potential for repercussions down the road, and indirect impacts, I think, on the city. So we're keeping an eye on things. We're just at the very beginning of it. There's a lot of time. 90 days doesn't seem like a whole lot of time, but we do it every year. And so there's legislatively speaking, a lot of time. And we'll see, we'll keep you on top of anything that is really directly potentially going to impact municipalities. And there's a lot more to come. We're hitting bill introduction deadlines in another 2 weeks. February 9th is the deadline for Senate bills. The 13th is the deadline for House bills. So there are many hundreds of bills left that we will be seeing in the coming weeks. So to the legislative work group, it's just going to get more and more. But I think those are the big updates for tonight.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Anne, and it's glad to hear that the 287G, which this council has been pushing to have removed for 2 sessions now. So I'm glad to see that there's some traction. Councilmember DeBala.
Thank you. Speaking of 287G, so when a bill that the city has testified on, has submitted testimony on, such as these 2 immigration bills that we have submitted testimony on, when that goes to the floor, does the city testimony get sent to leadership as a matter of course, or do we need to ask for that to happen in this case?
So when a bill comes out of committee and goes to the floor, the entire public can see all of the testimony. So certainly, you know,
That kind of covers it then.
yeah, we can certainly
Okay.
highlight it for the Senate President and the House Speaker.
Please.
Happy to do that.
Thank you.
And so, Anne, one question, have you, I know that I'm trying to track the Silver Act. I know that that was something that, that I was pinged about, and I was just wondering, you know, in terms of the other housing bills, are you hearing anything in Annapolis regarding the housing bills that have come forward?
Yeah, things are still trickling in. The Silver and Starter Homes Act
Other home, yeah.
is one of really three bills that are kind of coming from the administration on housing. We are also expecting the perennial priority of the good cause eviction. Delegate Wilkins will have that. And you know, there's a smattering of other bills related to renters. That, you know, the governor just continues to push on ways to try to improve housing development. And I think we're waiting to see. I know that MML is working closely with the housing department, the state housing department, on the Silver and Starter Homes Act to see, you know, it's a happens every year with these kinds of bills because they're talking about zoning and permitting and all. And there's a lot of work with MACO and MML to strike a good balance that doesn't usurp local authority, but also does try to make it easier for housing development to happen. You know, we can have a more in-depth discussion on any of those bills if you like.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, let's see if I see any other hands. I know that we're gonna get ready for the rapid fire response. So thank you again to our working group. Oh, Councilmember Wesselek, I see your hand now.
Thank you. Sorry, just a quick last minute, and this is almost more for residents. I just got off the legislative call for Trans Maryland, and I wanted to bring one bill to folks' attention that has a hearing next week, which is HB 63, called ridiculously the Fairness in Girls Sports Act. So this is one that Trans Maryland is opposing. If anyone wants to find out how they can submit their own testimony or be a part of that, let me know and I can put you in touch with the right people. Thanks.
And Councilmember Wesselek, if the committee agrees based on the criteria that we have, that this is something that the city should also weigh in on, just make the recommendation and let us know.
Yes, thank you. I requested it for it to be on the tracking list, so next time we talk through things, we can consider it.
Great.
Right.
Not seeing any other hands.
Councilmember
Landman, I don't see you're muted.
I'm trying to. Are you?
There's an echo.
I'm trying to use my phone. I guess.
Okay.
Okay. I guess
If you use your phone, then mute your computer.
My computer screen says I'm muted, but I'm gonna try. All right. Does that work? No. Okay. I'll talk.
But we can bear through it. Okay.
Okay. Just a quick question for Anne. How bad is the opposition from the?
I think the issue is that Anne is not muted right now, so that's causing the echo.
I'm gonna try. Okay. Let's see if that works. Does that?
It appears
No, it sounds like you're in the meeting twice, once in your phone, once on your computer. And so it sounds like they've It looks like you're muted on your computer.
I called in my tech support.
Oh, that's better. That's better.
I put my phone in the next room. Just a quick question, Anne. How deep is the opposition from the sheriffs and the organized police to the 287G? I know there are 8 counties that are currently signed up with agreements with ICE, so I'm wondering whether we should expect a really big fight or whether the numbers are just overwhelmingly in support. Thank you.
I think yes to both. I mean, I think that this is going to be hotly debated. Yes, you know, local law enforcement is opposed, and yes, the supermajority of Democrats will get it through in the end.
Hey, just checking to see, not seeing any additional hands. All right. Thank you so much, Anne, for joining us this evening. We'll see you again next week, but I know that the committee will be working with you and I will be talking to you over the course of the week as we ramp up testimony development.
Absolutely. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you, you too. Sorry, I muted myself. Just want to check to see if we have any comments any public comments on voting items this evening. Just as a reminder, the voting session tonight is the first reading ordinance approving the FY26 budget amendment number 3. Do we have any any public comments on voting items this evening?
No, we have 2 general public comments, starting with Mary Machui.
Wonderful. Ms. Machui? Ms. Machui, are you on the line?
Yeah. Mary Jane, you're muted. I don't know if you can unmute yourself.
Thank you. I think I unmuted.
We hear you
did.
now.
We can hear
Thank
you and
you.
we could see you.
I wish I could have been spoken when Anne was there. I hate the Developmental Disabilities Administration. I fought with them for 20 years for my son. They don't return my calls. They knocked him down to current request, which is the lowest rung of help up from crisis prevention, which means his chance of getting help is knocked down from 10% to 0%. And you can be a millionaire and still get help from the DDA, but we're poor and we can't get a cent from them. And if you know anything about developmental disabilities, the main place you can get help is the Developmental Disabilities Administration. Why? I've heard all people complain. I've never heard a good word about it. Why can't one of you at least have the guts to go and tell them off? Why do I have to keep calling over and over to get rude lies and to say they were refusing to tell me where they knocked said they're not going to help him? Why? No, I'm sick and tired of it. And now, you know what? Christopher Soames, he's going to get nothing at the end of this month. His SNAP is going away the end of this month. His Medicaid's going away the end of this month. How in the hell are we supposed to exist? Okay? Thank you. And I wanted to thank belatedly Sergeant Wolf from the Tacoma Park Police Department for coming to one of our Parents of Special Needs Adults meeting. One person showed empathy, and I appreciate that. I'd appreciate more empathy, but I appreciate his. Thank you very much. Have a good evening. But don't forget my son, okay? Don't forget him.
We won't. Thank you very much, Ms. Machui.
Thank you.
So the next commenter is Mark Harper.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm Mark Harper. I'm the pastor at Tacoma Park Presbyterian Church, just up the hill, up the slippery, slidey hill from you. I had an opportunity and the privilege a few weeks ago to speak to the council, expressing the support of myself and the session of Tacoma Park Presbyterian for the resolution originally drafted by Councilperson Landman for protecting Tacoma Park residents from abusive federal immigration enforcement. And it's our understanding that there is a revision to that resolution that has been drafted. I simply wanted to again voice the support of our session for that resolution, and in particular this revised resolution. I think right now, clearly those forces in our country and community that are trying to sow fear and division are ramping up their game. And it feels to me now is an essential time for all of us to come together and ramp up ours too. And this is a very clear statement that could come from you all to indicate our resistance to the lawlessness of ICE, especially in our community. Just speaking tonight to urge that the council pass as quickly as possible or adopt as quickly as possible this revised resolution. I want to, in particular, I like the language in it that emphasizes that we really are all in this together on so many levels: local government, community organizations, faith communities like our own. We all need to be in this together in a united way. A week or two ago, Councilperson Dabala sent me a very helpful email, and I appreciate it. And I never got back to you fully, but I wanted to just say that the questions about further action were important that she raised. I just wanted to say that Tacoma Park Presbyterian wants to partner with council in some of the ideas of the resolution, getting together soon to talk about ways that we can do better with food assistance to neighbors in need, creating neighborhood watch teams, doing rapid response when we see ICE agents. And if we can be at all helpful as a church community offering space for meeting, we would gladly do so. But I thank you for your time, and I thank you for your leadership. We're especially appreciative of the statement recently by Police Chief Duvall, distancing the police department from ICE actions. But thank you, and we hope this will be resolved soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Do we have any other general public comments this evening?
No, that's it.
Okay, wonderful. So we're going to move into council comments. Do we have council comments this evening? And I see Councilmember Honzek first. Go right ahead.
Hi, thank you. Sorry, can you hear me? Good evening, everybody. I just want to thank everybody for coming out virtually with us on this very cold and frigid night. And I'd like to start with each of the commenters. Mary Machui, I really appreciate that you come out almost every week. And I know I've probably said it before, but it's worth saying again, because you said it's not often that you feel like you get empathy. I want to repeat that my own grandmother raised a child with disabilities, an adult child. And every time I hear you speak, you remind me of how angry and pained she was raising her child and dealing with the Texas equivalent of, the Developmental Disabilities Administration that also had so many flaws. And it is it is really heartbreaking for me to watch you and wonder how exactly I might be of the most assistance, knowing also the amount of bandwidth that I have. I tell you, I would do it if I knew exactly what I could really make a difference on, and that was within my means. I wish there were an easier solution for us as a local council, and I'm sorry that you find yourself so alone. It's awful to hear that your son is about to lose his SNAP benefits, and I really, really wish that there were something that we could do to help with some of that. But we're happy to help you find more resources for your son. I know that we have so many good resources across this community and the county. Secondly, Mr. Harper, again, I thank you for coming out about these really important issues, and your words speak to me, talking about how we can come together. It's a very generous offer that you have made for the church to be utilized for all these different kinds of ways of coming together and supporting our community. And we really, really appreciate the spirit with which you've come as a faith community into this dialogue with us. I'm glad that the statement of our police chief was well received, and I think you spoke about the mayor's statement as well being well received last week. And again, thank you for coming out to speak with us. And lastly, I just wanted to say thank you, first of all, to two entities. One is the city. You have really been showing up for us. Thank you, Director Braithwaite. You've been unbelievably responsive. I have been walking the streets a bunch myself, and each and every email that I've sent in has been responded to almost immediately. And then I see plow trucks coming wherever anything has been missed. And it's made a really big difference. I literally walked down the street today after having been there yesterday, and all of us watching the plows come in after we figured out what was needed. And today the maintenance guy at two of our biggest buildings on Houston said, "That was great. The city did such a great job." And you know, you don't hear that every day. So thank you. And then okay, time's up. But one more thing, really important shout out. Snow Angels. We had more than 25 Snow Angel volunteers show up from the community. So thank you. You helped so very many people. And there are a lot of you who I don't know your names. I understand all over the city there were volunteers helping other neighbors. So thank you, all of you out there. And a big shout out to Washington Adventist University students. We had more than 10 volunteers from the university because the VP of Student Affairs sent it out to his student body, but they didn't have their own shovels. So if we can think on that for the next time there's a snowstorm, we might get some more help. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Honzak. Councilmember Wesselink.
Thank you, Mayor Searcy. I'll keep this brief. I assume many of us will be saying this, but a big, huge thanks to the staff that have gotten our city through this storm. I know folks have been working overtime round the clock, and it's really, really appreciated. And lastly, I send my solidarity to fellow parents with their kids home from school.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Wesselink. I think of you often during snow days. And Councilmember Honzak as well. You're in that bunch. Councilmember Gilbert.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, two quick shout outs for me as well. And you're right, Councilmember Wesselink. I too am going to add to the list of people who are so appreciative of Public Works. I witnessed, there was and I'm assuming these were contractors, but there was a Bobcat out on Maple Avenue, and there was a big loader truck, and they were loading up the snow onto the truck, and there was a resident that ran out and requested some assistance because he really needed to get out of his parking space for an emergent need. And that gentleman jumped into action and came and cleared out 2 parking spaces for him so he can get out. And I thought that was awesome. I'm not sure if he was supposed to be doing that, if that was a Public Works employee or not. So I hope I'm not snitching nobody out and not getting in any trouble. But I just appreciated him taking the time out of what he was doing to go help that resident. And a quick shout out to Officer Brownlee. I think we recognized him last week for his life-saving efforts. And today he was so very helpful to a resident who had her phone taken, I want to say. She left it for a second and turned around and it was gone. And she was able to track it and it was on the move. And I called Officer Brownlee and he jumped into action and he went over to the Langley Park area and he's fishing in a pond And he was able to, he was astute enough to locate the vehicle that had this phone. And I really appreciate him taking the extra time and helping this young lady find her phone, because I know how frustrated and upset that she was. So appreciate the police department and all the work they do. And Officer Wolf for taking on that responsibility of going to those meetings for the parents of special needs. I used to be involved with that, and I know the concern that the parents have for the children and how they're being treated in our community. So I'm glad that our police department is still taking part in that and staying in touch with those parents. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Gilbert. Councilmember Landman.
Did that work?
It did.
I'm down to only one voice. That's good too. Sorry for the technical problems. First, I have to echo the thanks to not just to Daryl Braithwaite, but to her team who've been working 12-hour shifts and during really terrible conditions, which are going to persist for days. And if everyone who had written to me to complain and demand quick service and then got it would write to say thank you to the city Department of Public Works, I would appreciate it. And I did hear many positive comments too, but people really should, I think, take a breath and think just how incredibly hard our Public Works Department has been working, and take pity on them and say thank you to them, and give them a cup of warm cocoa in a to-go cup, so they can keep going. And I just also wanted to say that a special thank you to the police chief for his statement, especially his comments about the duty and the willingness of our police department to step in and intervene when they see violations occurring at the hands of federal officers. And so far, we've been spared the worst that Minneapolis and some other cities have experienced, but we have no reason to think that it will remain that way. And our county executive has warned that they anticipate a surge in federal enforcement, immigration enforcement here in this area, starting as soon as February, which is mere days away. So it's in that spirit that I wanted to say thank you, and to say that that is behind the resolution that we'll be raising for consideration later on this evening. And so I appreciate the police chief's proactive work in that regard. Thank you. And I also wanted to just remind people that the Fix-It clinic that was postponed due to the snow is rescheduled for, I believe, February 7th. So keep your broken stuff in hand and bring it to the Fix-It clinic at the library that day. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Landman. Councilmember DeBoer.
Yes, thank you. Ditto on the storm praise, and ditto on the residents who came out and helped, particularly in Long Branch, Sligo, who came out and helped each other. I didn't have to do too much with matching people up because they were so eager. And thank you for your patience, residents, because I also got calls. And then once people got a response so quickly, they were like, oh, okay. And that really helped. So all around, given the situation, well handled. So this Saturday is the rescheduled Kindness Day at Piney Branch, and maybe Play Day on Sunday, weather depending. Also, thank you to the police chief for the statement. And for the work that residents have been doing, that Councilmember Lamon and I were able to talk to residents along with the mayor a couple times recently about the work that's going on the ground behind the scenes, and what practical suggestions they have for what would really help them. And I'm not the only one, have been working pretty diligently on trying to make that happen. One last thing, switching topics completely, the COG Climate and Energy Policy Group met today. The COG regional government is going through a midterm review of climate goals, climate progress, programs that are working, not working, and what more we need to do. And we have now been through all of the pieces. Anybody who's interested in buildings, or today was EVs, today was waste. Anybody's interested in a particular section, I can get you the data and the slides, but the next meeting is where we talk about putting it all together and what it means. So this is for anyone who's interested in climate, what's going on at the regional level. So stay tuned. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember DeBala. Councilmember Schlegel.
Thank you, Mayor Searcy. Reverend Harper, thank you very much for your comments. And I do look forward, I didn't get to talk with you when you were here a couple weeks ago, and I would love to meet you in person and learn more about you. So thank you so much to you and for the Presbyterian Church's activism and leadership as we're in these unprecedented times. I also was very happy about and very grateful that the police chief, thank you to you, police chief, if you're on, for the strong statement that you made. And it's incredible how fast things are changing, but something that it clicked for me a few days ago was that there are so many ICE agents now deployed in Minneapolis, and could happen around here too, that we're seeing a swarming tactic where it's getting to be where if 6 or so officers surround somebody, it's very difficult to even capture on a cell phone what is happening inside that scrum. And that's what concerns me and makes me think we may be reaching a point where we should discuss how our own personnel can be able to be there as professionals and just by their very presence, most likely de-escalate things. I understand that's a very complex question, and all that I'm hoping is that we can discuss how to get ready for what, by all accounts, is coming and what more we can do. Ms. Machui, thank you as always for your testimony. And I am just wondering if it's a state agency that is letting you down repeatedly, is there any problem solving that anyone with our city could help, or on our council could help, in terms of who in our state delegation or even in Congress could assist in making a connection that's not happening for you? Thank you so much to Public Works. I had numerous emails with Director Braithwaite, so appreciative for the constant responsiveness. And this was such a wild storm because it took multiple passes. Plows had been through twice, and then the last part of the storm was the worst because it just put down that 1 to 3 inches of ice. So I appreciate all the residents who've been patient and also who've been calling things in. The one thing that I would like to see if we can adjust there around storm policies is when the plows have to block a sidewalk because they have to move the material somewhere, I would like to have it be made clear that residents are not expected to be shoveling a massive pile out like that. Last thing, sorry I'm over, just thank you so much to the Sycamore Avenue residents who've been helping with an eviction, to staff, to the mayor, especially to Councilmember Landman, and as well as County Council member Kate Stewart. It was a shocking thing, and it's incredible to see a well-organized neighborhood come together to help people. That's all.
Thank you, Councilmember Schlegel. And so in terms of comments this evening, I want to thank Ms. Machui coming out for your continued advocacy for your son. And if you could please just let me know, I'm happy to follow up with some members of our D20 to try to get a point of contact within the state disabilities office to connect you with if you're hitting a wall. So please feel free to reach out to me directly with your concern, and I'm happy to share it. In terms of the church and Mark Harper, thank you so much for coming out this evening. It has been we're hitting a crest, but I will say we've been running a bit of a marathon. I'm looking at Councilmember Hanzek and I, because we've been dealing with dealing with a lot of this since what, April of last year. Trying to make sure that we're able to provide support, direct support to residents that have been impacted, working to make sure that there's trainings that are taking place within our municipal buildings, partnering with folks like Casa de Maryland and Montgomery County Immigrant Resource Center to make sure that they have what they need and how those things can come back to the city. Advocating for multiple years now to have legislation in Annapolis that we just heard today, we're now seeing, right? The 287G ban was something we asked about last year and are finally starting to see these things move and resolutions that have been passed about that. And so I just want to stress that we are committed. I am personally committed to making sure that we're able to address these issues. But it's really important that we think about how we address them and how we're doing so in the appropriate manner. I said, met with some residents and on Sunday, Councilmember DeBalling and Councilmember Lamb were with me. This is a tricky space to be in because there are some aspects of these issues that you play a supporting role. There are other aspects that you may need to play lead. And there are other aspects that you have to be a spectator as a city. And so you have to keep in mind the legal authorities that you have, the jurisdiction authorities that you have, your charge as a nonpartisan government. It adds a level of complexity that is more than just making a political stance or just making a statement. It is more about how do we take our role as a city and what we can do as a city into action to truly protect the residents that are the most vulnerable among us, that are not showing up to these council meetings, is not going to write an email about a resolution. What they care more about is what are we doing on the ground to make sure that if their loved one is detained, that we're providing the necessary resources. So I do think that, you know, when we are thinking about where to spend our time on these very important issues and how to allocate the limited time that we have, we should keep that point at the forefront, that it is about direct action, not repetitive work that we've already done, not performative statements so that we can puff ourselves on the chest so our echo chambers will feel good, but what are we doing so that we can truly help the people that walking on the street are more likely than not to be picked up by ICE. And so definitely just want to stress that point. I have a couple of speaking engagements this weekend. Yay, me. I'm excited about it. I will be speaking at the Mayor's Innovation Project winter seminar this weekend. On Friday, I will be participating in our Spotlight, I think it's called the Spotlight, competition kind of thing, talking about some of the wonderful work that our sustainability work in terms of our buildings that Dory has highlighted, and some of the things that small cities like us may want to consider in order to improve building efficiency within their city. And I am also on Saturday facilitating a panel discussion with other mayors on building an age-friendly city. So how are we across the country dealing with aging in place, and what are some of the services that various communities have to support its aging population, and what are some of the things that we may want to talk about and consider to make that easier. So I want to thank the Mayor's Innovation Project for providing me with that opportunity. And I will also be attending, fingers crossed, I don't know what this weather's going to do, y'all, but I'm looking forward to Kindness Day and the Winter Play Day on Sunday. And so with that, I will turn things over to City Manager DeSpirito for City Manager comments.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to say, first of all, I appreciate all of the comments, and certainly we'll pass them on to Public Works. The appreciation and gratitude that was expressed this evening by multiple folks here with respect to our employees who are out in it, working in the cold and the elements and long shifts, probably not seeing their families all that much and sacrificing a lot of personal time. We really, I know we all appreciate them, and it means a lot that you all have expressed that as well. I would likewise like to acknowledge the work of the police department, those folks that get out into the field in particular, and also our code enforcement staff who have also been very active trying to encourage residents and businesses to keep sidewalks clear. So thank you for acknowledging it. So starting with Public Works, our city complete winter weather response plan is available on the city's website. Just search for snow response. This plan provides a map that shows the city divided into 5 zones. Each zone has an assigned response vehicle. They focused on primary roads first, those with the heaviest traffic, and which connect neighborhoods. Next comes secondary roads, which have shorter streets with fewer homes. A link to this page will be included tomorrow in the posted city manager's comments. I'd like to also express appreciation to Adventist Healthcare, who have provided some of their parking lots, access to some of their private parking lots for Public Works to deliver snow that they've taken off the streets, and in many cases you got to have a place to put it. So they've got some big parking lots, and Mr. Cohen and his team have been more than generous and grateful and easy to work with. Public Works as a great partner, so we appreciate that quite a bit. With respect to our refuse and recycling service, because of ongoing hazardous road conditions and the extreme cold, all trash, recycling, and food waste collection will be canceled for the remainder of this week. We really need some time to continue to clear the streets so that we can have access and safe access for both residents bringing refuse and recycling out, as well as our employees being able to gain access, which in many cases is just one cleared lane on the street. Collection service is expected to resume next week, though it will be limited to trash collection only. We've made that decision today. Again, that allows us, by not doing yard waste and food waste collection and recycling, we know that we have to double up on trash collection. We will have gone a whole week without it, and then we'll have next week's needs. So we appreciate folks' patience, but we'll only be collecting refuse in city containers next week. And then we hope after next week to get back to our normal schedule of the other services. Okay. From the police department, I appreciate that there have been numerous references this evening to the police chief's statement. I think it is important that I have an opportunity to read that statement for the public's benefit. Not everybody, it is posted on our website, but for those that haven't seen it, I'd like to refer to it. So this was generated by our Chief of Police, Antonio Duvall. Many law enforcement officials have voiced concerns about the tactics federal immigration enforcement officers are using. The International Association Chiefs of Police and the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives are organizations to which I, the chief, belong, and have called for a review of the tactics used by federal law enforcement. I share these concerns and want to reaffirm the rule of law and what we expect from federal law enforcement officers conducting activities in Tacoma Park. Our city is not a lawless zone. Every agency conducting enforcement activity here must comply with the United States Constitution, Maryland state law, and the professional standards long required of American policing. Police officers in Tacoma Park swear a constitutional oath to protect life, uphold the rule of law, and defend the rights of all persons within Tacoma Park. That oath and our code of ethics govern our conduct and informs our expectations of all agencies operating in our community. Accordingly, we publicly affirm the following 3 principles. 1, non-participation in civil immigration enforcement. Our mission is to serve and protect all residents, regardless of immigration status. Therefore, Tacoma Park police officers do not take part in federal civil immigration enforcement. Immigration enforcement is a federal civil matter. When local police engage in immigration enforcement, it erodes community trust, reduces crime reporting, and compromises public safety. 2, duty to intervene and report unlawful conduct. The duty to intervene does not disappear because an officer's badge is federal. If any agent engages in unlawful detention, excessive force, lack of valid judicial authorization, or civil rights violations, our officers retain both authority and the obligation to intervene and to report such conduct through appropriate legal channels. And 3, protection of all residents. Constitutional protections apply to everyone, not only U.S. citizens. No individual in our city should fear calling 911, seeking help, or cooperating with us as police officers because of their immigration status. Public safety depends on trust, transparency, and accountability, not fear. Federal immigration enforcement personnel working in Tacoma Park must follow the constitutional standards and professional expectations that govern law enforcement activity in our city. Federal agents are expected to clearly identify themselves, display agency affiliation, act pursuant to valid judicial warrants, and respect due process. Masked, unidentified, or unaccountable law enforcers that instill fear rather than ensure safety are inconsistent with the tenets of democratic policing and will not be normalized in this community. The City of Tacoma Park stands for constitutional governance, human dignity, and public safety rooted in trust. Federal agents who operate in our city are expected to do the same. That is Chief Duvall's statement, and I believe we can all get around that. Also from the police department, join us for Coffee with a Cop on February 11th from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Hosted in partnership with the Metropolitan Police Department 4th District and held at Starbucks at 232 Carroll Street, Northwest, Washington, D.C. Again, that's February 11th. Enjoy a cup of coffee while chatting with officers in a relaxed, friendly setting. Whether you have a question, a concern, or just want to say hello, we're here for it. Okay. And finally, from the police, our police officers are proud to once again support the Maryland Special Olympics and will be participating in the Polar Bear Plunge to raise funds for this important issue. They will plunge into Chesapeake Bay on January 30th. Our community can support their efforts and stand with our officers as they take the plunge to benefit the Maryland Special Olympics. Information on how to donate and get involved is available through the link provided on social media and the police website. Okay. From Housing and Community Development Department, join us next Tuesday, February 3rd, for a public meeting presenting the request for traffic calming and sidewalks at 6:30 p.m. in the Community Center Auditorium. This will also be available virtually to residents, and information on our website will be provided on how folks can join us virtually. This will be a chance to comment and provide feedback on the request received by your fellow residents. Spanish translation is available, and we do have a virtual sign-up to participate via Zoom and on our website. You can find more information on our website by searching traffic calming and sidewalk requests. And finally, from HCD, our code enforcement staff are going around and ensuring that there are safe sidewalks for all. A reminder to please clear the full width of your sidewalk of snow and ice if you haven't already done so. At minimum, you must have a clear, continuous 3-foot wide path of the paved sidewalk so that all residents can safely traverse the city. Please be aware if you are not in compliance, you may receive a notice and eventually a citation, perhaps from staff. Okay. Finally, from the city manager's office, this week's recreation, I do want to mention recreation department quickly. City recreation classes will resume tomorrow as scheduled. That's the city recreation classes. Information about sports will be forthcoming. Those schedules are a little bit in flux. But recreation classes will resume tomorrow as previously scheduled. And from the city manager's office, this week's shout out to staff is from our Housing and Community Development Department. Our housing manager, Paloma Arroyo Lefebvre, has been working with her team to address a number of tenant concerns at buildings across the city. In the past 2 weeks, this has included elevator outages, temporary displacement after a fire, evictions, facilitating conversations between tenants and landlords, and assisting tenants with forming a tenant association. We are lucky to have her with the city. Thank you, Paloma. And that concludes my report this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager. And I just want to echo all of the hard work that you mentioned from our Public Works Department, our Police Department, and Paloma came in and hit the ground running. So I'm very grateful for all of the amazing staff that we have. And so with that, I'm going to move into our presentation for this evening, our Raftellus Financial Sustainability Report. City Manager, am I turning this over to you?
Yes, thank you. I can introduce this, Madam Mayor. Get my documents in front of me here. We have once again, Council may recall that in, I believe it was December 10th, representatives of Raftellus, a professional firm that does work and has done work in the past for us on financial forecasting. They did a presentation to refresh us on our revenue forecasts and financial outlook for multiple years. That was on December 10th. We have some in the presentation tonight. We will refresh a little bit on that. But the main focus this evening will be a financial sustainability evaluation for our community. And to that end, we have Mr. Will Kerr and also Mike Burton of Raftellus available to walk us through a presentation. We'll be very happy to entertain questions from Mayor and Council and comments. But ultimately, this is a presentation at this stage, the second presentation, and there will ultimately be a final report that would address both of these presentations that would be available, ultimately coming to the council and available publicly. So with your permission at this point, I would like to turn to Will to see if we can get the presentation up.
Sure. Thanks, Rob. And thanks so much, Council and Mayor, for having us tonight. Really a pleasure to be back in front of y'all. So I'm Will Carr and joined today by my colleagues, Mike Burton and Mead Olson. And I'm going to ask Mead, if you don't mind sharing your screen to get our presentation pulled up. And I also want to invite, Mead and Mike, please chime in. I'm going to plan to lead the presentation, but I do want my colleagues who've spent, just as much time as I have, working through this analysis to chime in and fill in any gaps that I might miss along the way. So with that, we'll start moving into it here. Again, it's a pleasure to be here, and like Rob said, the goal here tonight is to really lead off with our financial sustainability evaluation. And one of the big goals of that, and Mead, you can go to the next slide. One of the big goals of that was well, there were kind of two things. First, we wanted to kind of set the stage a little bit and have a conversation about our existing property tax rate. Then we wanted to move into a revenue survey that we've performed. So we performed a revenue survey looking at some peer communities, both inside Maryland as well as kind of a broader look at what communities across the country are doing. We'll share some findings from that I think you guys will definitely find interesting. From there, we'll jump over to our financial forecast. Really not a ton in our forecast has changed, but we'll give you a quick refresher, walk you through a couple of the financial planning scenarios that we developed, and then welcome any comments, questions, through the course of this presentation as we go. So with that, I'll start moving along here. So leading off, again, we wanted to lead off with some commentary on property tax rates, just to make sure we're all on the same page out of the gate. If you go to the next slide, Mead. So the city's current property tax rate is 55.22 cents, which, as y'all probably know, is the highest property tax rate in Montgomery County. So over there on the right is just a list of the communities in Montgomery County, the property tax rates sorted there. And there's Takoma Park right at the top. If you take a little broader look at it, you guys are actually, when it comes to a statewide look, you're actually in the bottom third. When you look statewide at the combined property tax, city, county, state, and you can see it's sort of stacked up there. Takoma Park ranks 111th out of 162 municipalities in Maryland. However, that may not be much comfort. We recognize that being at the top of your most local peer communities may not sit well with you. So we did want to provide a little bit of context on what puts us at the top of Montgomery County. And these next two slides are really important, and we've got a lot of text on the slides that I'm going to read through. So bear with me for a minute here as I just read through this information. But recognize we thought it was important to get all this onto paper so that it could be taken home and referenced later if you so choose. And these are items that we've worked together with staff to identify as kind of the drivers behind what puts us at the top of the property tax rates in the county. All right. So the city has a unique distribution of assessed parcels whereby the largest burden for property tax revenue falls on single-family homeowners. So we got a few sub-bullets about that. Detached and attached single-family homes comprise about 50% of the city's total housing unit count, but pay about 77% of collected real property taxes. So you've got about half of your housing stock is single family, detached or attached, but that 50% is paying over 3/4 of the real property taxes. Multifamily properties are relatively older structures, 60 to 70 years, that generate relatively fewer tax revenues, only about 12%. Because their assessed value is lower due to depreciation of the improvements, that is, the buildings are old, and because multifamily buildings are often subsidized or deed restricted and thus are assessed at a lower level than other residential properties. So just the value, the taxable value of these properties is lower, which pushes the burden towards the single family homeowners. The next one's, geographical and population constraint here. Tacoma Park has a small city population, 17,522. And geographic footprint is fairly small too, 2.1 square miles. And therefore, it does not have the broad population base as larger cities do with which to spread the cost of public services. So some of the peers you're comparing against, like Rockville, for example, is considerably larger community than Tacoma Park. So kind of moving away from that first main bullet, the city also has a limited commercial tax base. Only about 5% of collected property tax revenue comes from commercial properties, and essentially no industrial tax base. So there's not, there's not a big shopping mall. There's not big high rises. So the commercial tax base is limited, and really there's hardly any industrial base at all. City is largely built out, has experienced very little economic development in the past 40 years, and has added, very little taxable value. This means that the city relies on its existing largely residential property tax base to fund the city's broad array of public services. So when it comes to growing your revenues, if you intend to grow revenues, you either got to grow the base or raise the taxes, and that's sort of the trade-off there. Solid waste recycling and food waste collection services are funded through the general fund rather than an enterprise fund or a separate fee. Many other cities have established enterprise funds charging a separate fee to property owners for these same services, which would result in a lower property tax rate that does not reflect the separate fees. So some of the other communities in Montgomery County have homeowners pay a solid waste fee, so that the cost of that service isn't included in their property taxes, what that's highlighting. Tacoma Park also provides a wide array of public services. Tacoma Park features the only full-service police department and independent municipal library in the county. The city is also the only municipality in the county that provides a curbside collection of food waste as a public service. And finally, the city provides high levels of service and programs that other cities in the county typically do not, or not to the same degree. This includes a broader spectrum of housing programs, sustainability programs, food waste collection, recreation programs, and scholarships associated with those, tree programs, passport services, etc. So again, it's a lot of text there. But we wanted to set the stage. If you were to be asked, why is our tax rate the highest? These are several of the reasons that put you at the top and that make Tacoma Park unique. So, and I think I'll keep moving here. I'm happy to answer any questions. There's also a pretty good stopping point in 3 or 4 slides where we can field some questions on this first sustainability evaluation. So the next step in the process, again, that kind of sets the stage a little bit. And one of the things that we were brought in to do originally was to take a look around and say, all right, if we want to reduce our reliance on property taxes, what other things are out there? What are other communities doing? What can we do to relieve pressure off of those property tax rates? So what we did was we did a revenue survey. And what that entailed, you can go to the next slide, Mead. What that entailed was taking a look at City of Tacoma Park's existing revenue portfolio. Then we compared that against what other cities and towns nearby and around Maryland are doing, with the goal being to identify and highlight revenue sources that you guys aren't currently, that you either don't have or aren't currently prioritizing. So you can see the list of towns that we really took a deep dive in. Certainly there was some broader context that we looked into, but these are the ones where we really dug in to audits, budgets, to take a look and see how they're recovering revenue and compare it against Tacoma Park. And then finally, we also did a broader look. we sought guidance from Raftelis colleagues who do this type of work, across the country, as well as industry resources for other potential opportunities. So we've got 2 slides. The first slide talks, this slide's called Inside of Maryland. And, the way that I would think about these is that the inside of Maryland stuff is, these are the things that we feel are pretty feasible, are things that could be done. Some of them are more effort than the others to do and to execute. But that would be, where you go from there is sort of a policy discussion and would need to be, a plan made by council. These are the things that we see being done in Maryland and across the country, but they're legal in Maryland and are potential options for you guys to consider. And then on the next slide, we've got kind of a broader list. Some of the stuff's not even legal in Maryland, but it's some of the big revenue opportunities that other communities are tapping into. So kind of moving through the revenue survey for the inside of Maryland items. The first 2 are really related to, I mentioned this earlier, it's really related to growing that tax base. So economic development and annexation. Of course, starting with economic development, really the benefit there is the long-term growth and the long-term impact of growing that tax base. So if you're able to kind of grow the base through economic development activities, bringing in business or additional development, that brings in tax revenue and supplements your existing tax base. Of course, the challenges, there are certainly challenges with economic development. Often there's upfront investment required and development timelines can vary. I mean, often this type of thing doesn't really happen overnight. Takes a long time to come together. Annexation, of course, annexation, that's, annexing nearby areas into city limits, and you pick up some revenue base that way. Of course, you'd have to provide services to those customers. But that you could broaden the tax base that way. The challenge is, you've got some geographic constraints. There's probably some areas where annexation is completely off the table. The other thing is annexation is not always very popular, especially with the people being annexed. So annexation, maybe an option out there. We talked about it a little bit with staff. I'm not sure that there's a ton of opportunity there, but did seem like there's potentially some opportunity on the economic development front. One thing we talked about earlier is solid waste fees. So these are pretty common with your peers. Many of the communities we evaluated had enterprise funds for solid waste, so they were charging a fee for solid waste instead of recovering that through taxes. It's a good way to do it. I mean, it's certainly very fair because it shifts those costs directly to the users. And there's ways to leverage it to encourage things like waste reduction. But it's sort of a net neutral, to the extent that you had a solid waste fee go into effect. The question would be, would property taxes go down an equivalent amount? And that would be something that you'd have to think through and address concerns and strategize around for sure. Grant funding, the city staff are already doing a pretty good job of seeking out grant funding. There's always more grant funding out there, but it can be very time consuming to research and apply for. There's consultants out there that do that full time for a living. So and sometimes you can spend a lot of time trying to run down a grant that doesn't come to fruition. So grants, of course, excellent options because they're, it's access to non-repayable capital. But again, there are some drawbacks there. Asset leasing was a big one that we saw among your peer communities. And what that is you're leasing city-owned assets. And an easy example is parking facilities. Sometimes cities will own parking facilities. They will lease that out to a management company who manages and runs the parking facility. The city makes lease payments off of it. And then the parking company manages and collects the parking fees. But there's other types of asset leasing opportunities that are out there as well. But it's all about having the right assets. It's about having the either the land or the buildings or some sort of asset that folks can benefit from using, for their business, really. Fee enhancements, indexing evaluation. Again, this is something that city staff's already doing a decent job of, and probably, maybe not a ton to gain there, because it's my understanding that city staff is looking at fees every year, every couple of years, to make sure that they're keeping up with inflation and recovering the cost of providing those services. So that's a potential option out there as well. And then finally, you guys are interesting. Montgomery County is interesting with this tax duplication funding mechanism. I mean, it makes sense, but it's fairly uncommon. It's not very prevalent at, certainly outside of Maryland at least. But it sounds like there are opportunities every once in a while when the county is kind of reevaluating the way that it is allocating those tax duplication funding payments. And to the extent that the opportunity presents itself, that's something to keep an eye on, is to, certainly, try to optimize the city's allocation of the duplication payments. All right, so that covers, the things that we saw your peers doing and the things that look like they're, somewhat readily accessible. Here's the broader look, and some of this is kind of interesting. It's sort of, some of these are outside the box and may not be a great fit, or legal in Maryland, but we thought, in the spirit of giving you as much information as we can, these are some of the items that we encountered as we took a broader look nationwide. So, the first one is this idea of asset monetization. And really when we say asset monetization, what we mean is really squeezing every drop of revenue out of city assets that we can. So it's this idea of turning city assets into an investment opportunity. So some examples, solar rooftops. Solar rooftops can be leased solar rooftops can either generate power for use internally or be leased so someone else can generate power for their use. So that's one example. Of course, that asset leasing, item we just talked about on the last slide, that would fall under there. Development of vacant land. We heard some interesting, or we read about some interesting things as we researched some of these items. For example, Richmond, Virginia has a event venue that they will rent out. There's some sort of asset that they have that they're able to rent for events. So it's stuff like that. It's kind of creative, out of the box, thinking as to how can we squeeze every drop of revenue out of the assets that we've got. Innovative fees, people get more and more creative, over the years. They come up with innovative fees. I think we all remember or may have read about the congestion pricing that New York City tried to implement and did not work so well. But there's other types of innovative fees. There's vacant lot levies, which actually Washington, D.C. has something similar, their Class E tax. Digital advertising fees. So if you've got digital billboards or digital locations where you can sell ad space, I mean, that'd be another example. So it's really kind of this idea of how can we be creative, again, with what we've got. Renewable energy tax credits. There was a program where government entities could pursue renewable energy tax credits and actually get paid out as cash instead of a tax credit. But that program is really being phased out by the current administration, and the long-term availability of that is really unknown. Joint economic development districts, special improvement districts, that's kind of setting up these improvement districts to fund infrastructure and assets. Public access EV chargers. I understand the city already has a couple of EV chargers. I don't know that would make a whole heck of a lot of money, but it's something that's out there. Naming rights for public assets. Yeah, I think the thing that always comes to mind is stadiums, but it doesn't have to be that big. Maybe it's a park or a skating rink or something like that, an ice skating rink in the winter. It's something like that can be named or sold to make a little money to cover cost. City branded merchandise, probably not a big money maker. New York City has done a good job of that one, most famously. People need like decks and things like that. So may not be a good fit, but can be a revenue generator and potentially a significant generator for other communities. Finally, last two, local sales taxes, local option sales taxes, things like that are very prevalent. Nationwide, I think the majority of states allow some sort of local option sales tax, but those currently aren't legal in Maryland at the city level. It's my understanding that Takoma Park is advocating at the state level for the authority to implement something like that, and that's a great opportunity because you can pick up some revenue off of non-residents, but good one there. And then finally, temporary income taxes are another thing we've seen around, but again, not currently legal in Maryland. That income tax stuff is managed at the county level. So probably not really a fit there. So again, just to kind of sum it up, I mean, it feels like the things on the slide before this, the inside of Maryland, that feels like the things that are a little more accessible to you guys. This slide was meant just to get the wheels turning, thinking outside the box, see if anything piqued interest. But I'm happy to pause here. You're probably tired of listening to me talk anyways. I'm happy to pause here and answer any questions about the revenue survey or anything that you see on this slide or the last one.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Councilmember Honzak.
This is so great. Thank you. And so clear. I just have one question about annexation because it's come up a number of times. That I'm particularly enjoying looking at these different revenue options. They're so creative. Do you know of any cities in Maryland, especially in Montgomery County, maybe that have done some annexation that we could look to just see how that went and kind of what they faced? Or is that something you could share with us since you said you were looking at that?
Yeah. Will, I can jump in on that question since it's more of local history question for the county. In Rockville, we annexed a sizable private parcel. It was a former car dealership to adjacent to King's Farm up there to allow for a residential development of about 500 units with a component of affordable. That was something that we worked on for a number of years with a private property owner who was motivated to work with the city. The land had been in unincorporated Montgomery County, so it didn't come from another municipality. And I will say the county was very cooperative in working with us. We had, I think they saw two willing partners, and both of us were putting investments into this project. So that ultimately would raise county revenue. County taxes could be generated at a higher degree with the improvement as a result of the project. So that was one example. Rockville is presently pursuing some other annexation ideas. They are in flux. They're in a state of, they're in process. So I can't really speak to those publicly, but it, it can be a viable thing on a strategic basis with a, it's a partnership. You've got to find a private property owner who's willing to sell or come in, and you've got to have a case to make with the county, and it's got to make sense for the city. So certainly those are things that could be explored on a strategic basis. They tend to be relatively small adds, but sometimes they can bring a outsized amount of revenue with them.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Honzak. Councilmember.
Thank you. Is in the inside of Maryland options is an interesting slide indeed. In those options for revenue, is your full report going to furnish a list of which municipalities in the comparisons that you did are using each of these approaches, such as annexation, which Councilmember Honzak just mentioned, inter-county special improvement districts or interjurisdictional special improvement districts?
So some of these are a little squishier. I mean, we can, our survey will absolutely point to, the ones, it's very easy to figure out who's charging a solid waste fee, who's got at least revenue, who's got grant revenue. The economic development and the annexation, we'll do our best on that one. We'll probably, the way we did our survey was really looking at audits and budgets, which don't always address in detail economic development and annexation. But we know that that's, those are very traditional ways of growing the tax base, and we felt, really compelled to include them on here. But we can certainly, within the report, I'll make a note that we should do our best to try to, have at least a note in there for each community about how they are leveraging these items.
I think absolutely that would be helpful if we wanted to reach out and learn about other communities' experiences. Thank you. And then you noted that there was no significant growth in the tax base. And, as a preface, I understand in that slide that shows us in the bottom third, that's probably due to the fact that many municipalities in other counties have significantly lower property values, so they require to set their property tax rates higher. But looking at our situation with our tax base, in your analysis, have our revenues grown faster than the rate of inflation for residential properties? So in essence, has our tax base been growing over the last several years? I'm thinking about the local market and about the teardowns and expansions of structures that we're now seeing $1 million plus home values. So even though we may not have seen a lot of new structures or development of vacant land, are we in fact seeing a growth in our tax base over the last many years? like faster than the rate of inflation.
Let us get up with Susan on that one. I mean, the city has been growing. The assessed value of the city has been growing, as y'all know, year over year. Whether or not it beats inflation, I'm not sure. I mean, I think it's trended around 3.5% to 4% per year, and that probably beat inflation for a little while, but maybe not over the, over the last couple of years. But let us huddle with Susan and get you a better answer to that question.
Thank you.
Councilmember Duvall.
Yes, thank you. This is very helpful, the revenue survey. And maybe you've already answered this question. I was going to look for an example of the asset leasing because I'm a little confused in my head about the difference between asset leasing and asset sharing. We have the piece of equipment that College Park wants to use. They have one that we want to use. I'm going to start buying 2 of each, we share. But you seem to, I think you mean something different. And so I'd like at some point to get an example or 2 of that so I can understand it better.
Sure. And we can get you formal examples. I mean, some stuff that we researched, I'm pulling up my notes here. So, Richmond, Virginia, they had an event space that could be leased for private events. That was an interesting one. It was pretty, we found a lot of nonprofits doing sort of the same thing, and it's hard to know how those are tied in with the city with regard to event spaces. Parking was a really big one, leasing parking facilities to a parking management company. So leasing a parking lot to, a third party to manage it, and to collect the parking fees and deal with the tickets and the towing and all that. And then the solar was another example, leasing rooftop solar. We found Las Vegas, DC, and Denver were all, leveraging solar rooftop leasing in some way, shape, or form.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Councilmember Duvall. Councilmember Landman.
Yeah, 2 quick questions. Thank you. The first has to do with the what you called in the outside of Maryland version list, vacant lot levies. Is that one of the things that is actually unlawful in Maryland, or is that just something that you didn't have examples of? We have discussed in City Council the difference between a tax on vacant or poorly managed properties, let's say deteriorated properties, versus a property tax. And did you look at fees versus taxes for vacant lots? So that's my first question. And the second question has to do with asset monetization. Did you see examples, for example, of cities that might, let's say, possess a property that could be built up or improved upon and then leased, where they've set up long-term relationships with, say, a developer who might restore a property and then lease it, and the city benefits long-term from the leasing, but in the short term might benefit from the rehabilitation of the property? I'm thinking not just huge ones, but individual properties they might have come into possession of. We have a couple of pieces of parkland, or I'm thinking of small pieces of real estate like the Thomas Siegler House. That's for the benefit of our other council members, where we might have a relationship with the developer that long-term generates revenues, but short-term might involve some kind of a lease arrangement or whatnot. So those are my 2 questions. Thank you.
Sure. So on your first question for the vacant lots, fee versus tax, I don't think that we were looking at it as specifically as that how you would administer it. It was more of the idea or the concept, but it sounds like you guys have already talked about the concept. In DC, they call it the Class E tax, where you pay a higher tax rate for it's either vacant or maybe it's rundown type stuff, just like you were talking about. So we didn't get into the nuance of it, and there's some legal restrictions in Maryland that you'd have to navigate. But it was just an idea that we encountered that we thought had some merit. In terms of the relationship with developers, redeveloping individual properties, I think that there's got to be something out there. I mean, so I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, and here it's common, but it's common, but it's usually sort of administered by local nonprofits. So there's been a couple of properties that have been restored that the city has backed, but the whole process is kind of managed by this local nonprofit. So let us look around and see if we can find specific examples of where that relationship was directly between the city and a developer.
And Will, I might be able to provide a little bit of commentary on this point. I know we'd mentioned that event space in Richmond, Virginia, and I was kind of on the periphery of a study that we did for them, and that was actually the restoration and renovation of an old train station. So the city worked with private developers and contractors to do that restoration. The city, I believe, maintained ownership of the asset, and they book it out for private events. They do a lot of weddings there. So it's kind of events like that private citizens as well as maybe corporate or commercial customers would be able to use.
Thanks, Pete. Good call.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I appreciate all that you all have shared, because it drills home a few things. I mean, I talk to my counterparts in Rockville and Gaithersburg often, and they are constantly talking about the fact that they have such large commercial bases, that it means that they don't have to tax their single family homeowners as much, that they're basically debt free, so to speak, between because they do their own permitting and planning responsibilities, that even as development happens, they get to charge the fees, they get to absorb those additional revenues as well. So they have different revenue streams that we don't have as well. One of the things that would be, because this is the age-old question. I mean, even when I first came on council, it said, we have to build, we have to build. New Hampshire Avenue is ripe, we have to build. When we're talking about economic development versus commercial property tax rates, I know that there's often this tension of, well, to alleviate the single family homeowners, we should increase the commercial property tax. But it seems like what you are saying to some degree here is that our commercial tax base is so small, right? And you want to try to grow it. There could be some negative trade-offs with just trying to redivert. And I know we'll get to the scenarios pretty soon. We can kind of play around with those things, but trying to redirect added tax costs to the commercial side, when we know that the issue is that we need to expand our commercial, kind of make some improvements in terms of infill development with our aging properties, like you said, and the fact that if we were to kind of grow some spaces, that could potentially bring in those added revenues without having to just tax the smaller commercial properties that we have right now.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. I think the way I always kind of the way it boils down in my head is if you need more revenue, either the rate has to go up or the base has to go up, because it's the base times the rate. So if the goal is to, try to not be at the kind of top of the list in the Montgomery County survey, thinking about ways to grow that base is really, really important. So whether it's through commercial, development, mixed use development, there are lots of different ways to do it, but it's the key kind of outcome is growing the base.
And also the point of the tax duplication, it is very unique, and I know that there are other municipalities in various counties across Maryland trying to figure out how they can broker a deal as well. So they're like, how did you all do that in Montgomery County? So I do recognize that we are and have been in conversations about our tax duplication formula and whether or not there's modifications that may need to be made as a result of additional things that come along that municipalities are excluded from, but are services that are provided through the county using our residents' dollars. And so I will say that there have been discussions, and we're constantly looking at that formula and trying to figure out ways in which we can recommend adjustments to the county to better support the idea of their services that we provide that the county otherwise would not provide to our residents because they live in the municipality, and so we should be adequately compensated for that. All right, so looking at the time, I want to make sure we're able to get to the next set of questions in the scenario. And City Manager Despirito, I see your mic is on. I don't know if you wanted to chime in at all before we move on.
Yeah, just a quick comment with respect to the commercial tax rate. Increasing that is probably not going to be our go-to because, as you indicated correctly, Madam Mayor, that base is so small. And increasing that, particularly to any noticeable size in terms of revenue we would collect, would probably just be passed on by the property owner to the tenants, the business tenants. What I think our best opportunity is to very strategically look at growth corridors, University of New Hampshire, for example, where the zoning is in place. We've got a, knock on wood, metro line coming in 2 years. And we've also got another partner across the highway, another county. It's conceivable when we talked about JEDs, Joint Economic Development Districts. Those things can be done where both entities, both public sector entities, governments, put a certain amount of money in and can both ultimately reap some of the tax revenue on the other side. There's a lot of acreage. As council knows, there's a lot of properties that are older and could hypothetically be redeveloped to higher earning, properties, ones that would generate a significant amount of money for the commercial tax base, which would provide relief to the residential tax rate. Thank you.
Great. Okay, we're going to move on to the next set of slides. Well, if you don't mind.
I think we'll be able to move through this a little quicker, but please, you'll let us know if you have any questions. There's again, a pretty good stopping point. Maybe I'll go through the next 4 or 5 slides and then open things up for questions again. So, like Rob said when we kicked off, we were here, meeting with y'all in December, going through the preliminary findings of our financial forecast. Yeah, this is just really an update of that. And to a certain extent, things haven't changed very much. So Mead, if you go to the next slide, we got a quick review of our major assumptions. So as you recall, this is kind of the forward-looking element of the study. So this is where we say, all right, here's where we are today. And if we project 5 years into the future, how does our financial forecast look? How are we financially sustainable? So in terms of major assumptions, O&M budgets, we're assuming that those will be executed at 90%. Historical execution's been averaged around 85%. But based on conversations with staff, it sounds like we expect to have strong execution going forward. So we're at 90% for the forecast starting in fiscal 27. In addition, kind of on the other side, kind of both of these bullets are under sort of that execution percentage bucket. In the past, we've actually slightly outperformed our revenue forecast, but we have left our forecast based on budgeted levels for fiscal 2026, and we've aligned with the preliminary estimates and budget for 2027. Working with Susan, and then forecasted forward off of there, off of budget. So, in the past, we've typically slightly outperformed the budget, and obviously hope to keep doing that. But we're projecting revenues off of budget. Capital spending is assumed to be executed at 85%. That's consistent with historical spend and execution. Growth in assessed real estate values. We talked about this briefly earlier. We're in line with city estimates. No real property growth is expected. We are expecting growth in assessed value, and I think the assumption is 3.5% per year into the future. Cable franchise fees, cable operating fees, which continue to decrease. So we've got those decreasing by 7% in fiscal 27 and each year thereafter. And really those are kind of getting to the point where they're not a huge meaningful amount of revenue. And then finally, operating expenses, so that would include personnel, are assumed to increase by an average of about 4% per year, which is consistent with kind of general inflationary ranges.
And Will, can I also add that operating expenses includes personnel?
Right. Yep.
The 3.9, just to clarify, the 3.9% is the rate at which your model represents both traditional, as we know it, operating expenses, including the personnel component, correct?
That's right. Yep. Thanks, Rob. So we've got, again, these charts that you guys have seen before. You've seen similar outputs. So what we've done is we've set up a few scenarios based on a couple of different tax rates. So I'll reorient you guys on the first chart, and then I won't explain the others quite as much because you will be experts after the first one. So chart on the left, kind of starting in the top left corner, that's our status quo at our 55.22 cents. That chart on the left, so the total cash in is represented by the green line on that chart, and the red line represents our total cash out. So in this situation, our projected expenses are higher than our revenues, our cash in. So we're spending more than we're bringing in, which means we're going to be drawing down on our reserve fund balance. And the reserve fund balance is shown over there on the right. So we're presenting a little bit of information, which is why there's, it's a little busy on there, but the blue bar represents the unassigned balance. And then that line on there represents the unassigned balance plus the assigned contingency reserve. So in 2026, we established that assigned contingency reserve to kind of set aside some contingency funding. So kind of the sum of those two is kind of follows that line. And as you can see, those two merge together there in 28. So we sort of assume that the assigned contingency reserve has been spent down. So we spent the contingency, by the time we get to 2028. And on our forecast, since our cash out exceeds our cash in, we've got this declining fund balance. But luckily, we've got some reserve fund balance on hand to be able to absorb that for a little while. So actually, we don't duck below that our reserve target, which is 17% of revenues there, and is represented by the that dark, I guess it's a black line on the chart there on the right. We don't dip below that until we get to fiscal 2031. So we've got a little bit of time, you know, based on this forecast. As we start pulling back on that tax rate, so the scenarios we ran, you know, involved considering a reduced tax rate. So if we pull that tax rate back by a cent and then some down to 54 cents, you can see that the gap between our cash in and cash out line gets a little wider. So we're drawing down on our cash a little bit faster there on the right. And actually by 2030, we're below our minimum reserve target, and some sort of action would be needed in 2030 to fix that. On the next slide, we've got our constant yield rate. So this is another, you know, basically a cent off of the tax rate down to 53.1 cents. So that results in an even larger gap between our cash in and cash out. And what's happening there is we've got kind of a further declining fund balance. And again, 2030 is the year that we sort of duck below that reserve target line, you know, same as the last scenario. But I think one important thing to point out is that really by 2029, under this scenario, we're virtually up against that reserve target. So our wiggle room, you know, is pretty much gone, you know, at that point based on the projection. So the next question is always, well, what does the action look like to fix that in the out years? And of course, we're certainly not asking anyone to make decisions on things that happen in 2030 today or anytime soon. But just, you know, food for thought. If you go to the next slide, Mead, you know, here are what some potential increases might look like to sort of right that ship. Because, you know, at the end of the day, what we really want is to be really tight between our cash in and our cash out. We want to be, you know, spending as much as we're bringing in and running things very tightly. So in order to kind of get that fund balance up in 2030 to where we want to be, we would need a pretty decent increase in 2030, because what's happened is over time, you know, as our fund balance has dipped, our costs have gone up, our revenues have stayed fairly stagnant. Now all of a sudden we're a little bit behind, and we got some catch up to do to right that shortfall in 2030. So by our estimates, it's you know, what is that, an 8-cent increase, which is, you know, fairly significant. And then on the constant yield tax rate, you know, it's a similar story. Of course, the increase would be a little higher because we've slipped a little further behind on our tax rate. So a little bigger increase is needed out in 2030 to tighten things up. So I'm happy to pause there. Welcome any questions. We've even got the model on hand if there's, you know, a certain scenario you want to see. Welcome any thoughts or questions or scenarios.
So I see Councilmember Schlegel. I do just want to acknowledge the time. And we do have a couple of other agenda items this evening. So Councilmember Schlegel, you can ask your question, but you're on mute.
One quick question and then one other one. Which inflation index do you use? Do you use the municipal cost index or the consumer price index when you're making projections and looking back at history?
Well, for this analysis, and I'll ask Mead to make sure I get this right. I think we're using, is it 4% or maybe 4.5% on personnel for planning purposes, and 3 or 3.5% on all others? Can you remind me, Mead?
Yeah, so we are using 4.5% in fiscal year 2027 for personnel, and that aligns with a study I believe staff is going through at the moment. For years after fiscal year 2027, we're using 4% on personnel and 3% on all other operating expenses.
Thanks.
So it's not necessarily tied specifically to, a cost index, but it's within, the range of where we would expect those cost indexes to go, out into the future.
Okay, thank you. The other question was, your presentation is obviously focusing on revenue and not the expenditure side, so that bottom line just keeps rising steadily in every graph. In your work with other municipalities, would you recommend any that we look at in terms of communities that tightened up on the expenditure side when they were facing this kind of long-term deficit spending pattern? And so we could see other steps that some of your other clients have taken on the expenditure side?
We can, one thing we could certainly put some commentary about is budget execution. That's always the budgeting is hard. And I think it has to be, if you're going to commit to being really tight on your budget, there's certain concessions you got to be willing to make, like being over budget. So it's definitely something that we can pull. It's very common for entities to not spend the full budget. 90% is, just anecdotally, we see that a lot. That's a fairly common level, but some places do, a better job of having a tighter budget, and other places not so much. So we've got, I think in the data that we pulled for those other communities, we can pull in a little bit of actual versus budget information and provide some flavor on that.
And Will, if I could comment on that, when you look at what's happened over the last several years, we did the study about 3 years ago, and at that point, you were starting off with about $4 million of reserves, and now you have about 14 million. What has happened is staff has done a really good job of having their execution rate relative to budget a lot lower than a lot of communities have. So they're not just willy-nilly spending the budget money just to spend it. So what may happen on this is that staff will continue to do a good job, and instead of 90% execution, they may do 83, 84, 85, whatever. And then that line will be significantly different. The difference between the green line and the red lines will get less, and the reserve balances won't go down as much. And that's what looked like happened over the last 3 years since we did the last study. So I believe that staff is beginning to try to tighten up the budgeting process so there's not that big of a gap between the budget and the actual. And we'll see how that plays out over the next couple of years. But I think when you're looking at this in terms of being alarmed at what it looks like, your staff is doing a really good job of executing at a lot lower than your budget level. And if what happens between the last study and this study happens over the next 3 years, we may see that curve not go down. The fund balances not go down as much as this graph is predicting, which is why Will was stating a minute ago, we wouldn't anticipate anybody getting too excited about having to have a tax rate increase in 2030, because there's a lot of water that'll go under the bridge between now and then, and a lot of it may be better than projected in these things because we're trying to be conservative. So,
thank you.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate you highlighting that, because that was one of the things that I have been, calling for over the years, and I'm so glad that our staff is really budgeting. We have a long history of budgeting high and spending a little lower, and it's like, well, can we just close that gap so we're not budgeting for so much and then coming in under? And I appreciate the fact that we are still moving in the right direction.
Yeah, because in the budgeting process, it's alarming. You think you you got a problem, and then when you look at the actuals, it isn't as bad as what you
Right.
thought it was going to be. So.
Yep. Councilmember Hanzak?
Thank you. Would you mind just going back one slide? Yeah, I guess this one will work. I was thinking the one I think actually before that one, but yeah, well, actually one before that one. Yeah. I just wanted to, while we have these slides in front of all of us and we just walked through this conversation, I think one of the things I just found myself calculating that I want to share with my colleagues is when the next, and this is not a partisan statement, this is based on the impacts of this current federal administration on jobs in our local economy and what we're seeing happening around us in the economy. I think it's notable that where you see, FY30, it's going to be, it's going to be November 28 when the national elections happen. And if there were a change and we saw a lot more jobs suddenly, big institutional changes, we wouldn't see those changes until, at the very earliest, we'd start to get a hint of them, like in January 29, right? So by the time we're getting to FY30, if you will, when we will be setting our tax rate around then, that's going to be a really critical time for us. So one thing that I take away from this top graph that we see here, which is where we are right now with our tax rate, is that we're unlikely to be able to reduce that tax rate barring some major shift in whether we were to be able to bring in somehow a lot more revenue from another source. We just really can't afford to do that. And I think and the other takeaway I have is that you can see clearly from this graph, you can look at it from a little bit different lens than what we've just been discussing, the 85% expenditure rate. I see this where you can physically see the reserves from previous generations, if you will, kind of subsidizing the COVID years, and then the time that we're living through right now, which all seems to me a fairly appropriate way for reserves to be used. There was the time of plenty when we had higher salaries all around, more people employed, et cetera. And then we had these really tough periods of the pandemic, and now inflation, and now this affecting us very locally. And so the previous generations are in essence putting a little bit of sweat forward, that's not so much sweat off their backs, towards this lean time that we're living through. But what we can't afford to do, I think, looking at these graphs, is to change that tax rate unless something else major changed structurally. Anyway, I hope you'll allow my editorializing. That's my takeaway, and I wanted to share that while we're all looking at the same data. Thank you, and feel free to comment. But
Thank you, Councilmember Hanzak. Councilmember Landry.
Looking at this slide and then the one with the constant yield rate. One of the things that perhaps you were not asked to calculate, and maybe it's still not possible to ask you to calculate it, but you'll have to tell me, is one of the scenarios we've discussed is using, some of us have discussed, is using the constant yield rate with an appropriate inflation factor built in for the to take into consideration, the principal costs that we face, which would be the personnel costs. I think the ECI is the factor that people have suggested. And I'm just asking you how different would the constant yield rate be from the status quo rate if it were the constant yield plus ECI? And I'm asking you that because if what we are trying to do as a community is to stick to a flat tax rate to the degree we can, but account for inflation in a reasonable way without the tax rate changing, what kind of a line would we see there? How different would it be from the current status quo line? or from the constant yield line? Would it be essentially analogous to the status quo line, or just about? And are you able to calculate that? I know you would have to estimate, as you have done for looking ahead to the other implications. We don't know the constant yield rate till they sign on the dotted line up in Annapolis, but perhaps you could comment. Thank you.
Sure, and I might actually ask Rob and Susan. I think that if I recall, we ran that scenario, and I remember the rate actually it aligned with either the reduced rate or the status quo maybe. But what we can do, in essence of it's not, and I understand we're probably running long at this point, but what we can do is we'll run that offline and we can share it with you, and we'll work with Rob and Susan on that.
Thank you. The numbers might be the same. The symbolic way in which we arrive at those numbers would be different. So I would appreciate it if you are able to do that. Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you. Councilmember DeBala.
Yes, thank you. Very quickly. I remember seeing a constant yield plus ECI chart somewhere along the line. So maybe I'm imagining things, but that would be helpful. To Councilmember Honzak's point, and to the answer that was given to Councilmember Schlegel on budget execution, that's the direction that I'm thinking. That given what's going on with jobs and other levels of government, lowering the tax rate just to turn around and hike it back up at a time when people still don't have jobs doesn't make a lot of sense to me. That said, I would appreciate the city manager looking seriously at some of these budget execution estimates. Don't want to go too far. Don't want to be in the situation where we might be going over budget. But historically, there's been plenty of room, and I'd really appreciate that being part of a budget presentation when we get that far in March. Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember, I'll just say real quickly, in the current FY26 budget, we did introduce and council did approve an execution rate for personnel where we took it from 100%, where we would budget for 100% of all designated FTEs, and instead looked at something a little more realistic in terms of that we always have some rolling vacancies throughout the organization. And so therefore we were about 6%, we budgeted about 6% less. I can affirm that my staff and I are going to look at, take another hard look at what that personnel percentage should be for FY27, as well as looking at capital and operational expenditures, and could a execution rate based on historical data be applied to those categories? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I just want to thank our presenters. I know that this is always really useful for us as we're thinking through the long-term impacts of decisions that we're making today as a council, and how it may impact our future budgets. I do want to ask the city manager, I know that there's been some questions regarding expenditures, and I know that we've done quite a few other studies in the past, like organizational assessments and the like, to help people get a better understanding of how we've looked through our organizational structure, and had a series of recommendations there that may actually also be beneficial for folks to think through as we are taking the revenue survey recommendations under consideration as well. And so with that, I was committed to getting you all out of here before 10 o'clock.
We did it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
And so thank you all so much. City Manager, if there are any additional questions that may come up for this team, should we direct them to you?
Yes, please do so. We're happy to entertain those, both comments and questions.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you so much. Okay, so now we're going to move to our voting items this evening. Councilmember Schlegel, I know that you've asked a couple times, you want to make a motion, but I'm respectfully asking for us to get through our agenda voting item before you make your motion. So the item right now is the first reading ordinance approving the FY26 budget amendment number 3. Just want to check with staff that there are no additional edits or points of discussion before the vote.
There has been no change in the first reading.
Wonderful. Thank you, Director Chung.
Thank
So
you.
would someone like to move the first reading ordinance approving the FY26 budget amendment number 3?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Honzak. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Dabala. Any points of discussion before we call the vote? Councilmember Schlegel?
Yes, thank you. Recognizing that the court expenses were not known ahead of time as we're getting this new police accountability board system in place. I wanted to ask the manager whether it may be possible to make to work into the FY27 budget some sort of reasonable estimate so that we're not surprised by a significant addition in FY27, and it might be based on any details that can be gleaned about the actual costs for court reporter panel people to be impaneled and their time and everything like that.
Seeing a head nod. Any other points of discussion before we call the vote? Okay, seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Okay, I think I just froze for a minute. Councilmember Landman?
Aye.
Councilmember Dabala?
Yes.
Councilmember Schlegel?
Yes.
Councilmember Honzak?
Yes.
Councilmember Gilbert?
Aye.
Councilmember Wesselak?
Aye.
Mayor Searcy?
Aye.
Just want to confirm that was 7 ayes, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Great. And so Councilmember Schlegel, you wanted to make a motion.
Oh, thank you. Actually, I believe it was Councilmember Landman, and she had no sound, so that's why I was asking on her behalf.
Whoever wants to make a motion, now speak now, forever hold your peace.
All right, I'll go ahead and do it since I seem to be on audio for the moment. I'd like to move that we amend the schedule, the agenda for our next council meeting to allow for a work session to discuss the resolution that was circulated to members of the council in advance of today's meeting.
Do we have a second?
Yes, I will second.
Points of discussion?
May I describe a little bit, or am I supposed to defend the motion before other people comment on it?
The motion on the floor, I would instead of having lots of discussion, I would prefer for other colleagues to be able to ask whatever questions they need of you, and then we can call the vote. Councilmember Dabala?
Yeah, just very quickly. We did talk about this a couple of weeks ago, and we did take everybody commented, and at that point, the majority of council members thought that spending time on a resolution as opposed to taking actions to help on the ground level, that was not something we wanted to do. So setting aside that I'm not sure why we're doing this again. My views on this haven't changed since the last time, and I won't go through all the reasons that I did last time, but I'm happy to explain that to people, any residents or any council members who would like me to do so at some point. I am wanting to point out one thing, which is the Ward 2 residents who are on the front lines. I'm hearing that they would like the city council and the city staff to focus on actions that will support our residents who are most vulnerable and the people and the other residents who are helping them to do that. And not a resolution of intent. And I don't personally see things on the list that are not already in some form, already in motion. So to summarize a whole bunch of things that I said last time, that's just where I'm coming from, and I'm happy to elaborate offline. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember DeBala. Any other points of discussion? Councilmember Gilbert?
Yeah, thank you. I was actually thinking on seconding it myself. In reviewing it earlier, I didn't have the opportunity to go all the way through the document, but I did like the idea of giving the community and council an opportunity to discuss it further on some of the matters. I did take except I did think that I think it was the idea of the direction for the chief of police. I did have some issues with that, and I wanted to discuss it a little bit further. So I don't have an issue with us discussing it more, but I'll leave it to vote.
Any other points of discussion? Okay. I will say I am still very confused regarding the purpose and the goal. As Councilmember DeBala noted, what I'm hearing is for us to spend the limited amount of time and resources that we have to actually help with organizing and doing things that could really directly impact those members of our community that are the most directly impacted. There's a number of things that are noted in the draft resolution. For instance, there is a reference to a congressional bill that has yet to be, the text has yet to be publicly posted. So I don't know how we can have a discussion about a federal bill that quite frankly falls a little bit outside of what we as a council should be weighing in on when the actual bill text is not available yet for us to review. Additionally, many of the state bills that were noted are things that we've already passed resolutions on. We heard from our lobbyists this evening that many of those items are moving forward. We are also in communication with the county in terms of the work that they're doing. And I'm also just very cognizant of the fact that this agenda is, relatively speaking, light. It is almost 10 o'clock. Next week's agenda is going to be packed with things that many of us have been trying to discuss for a very long time, such as the rec center development, and, continuing the noise control board actions and noise complaints and things of that nature. I personally do not think that this resolution in its current form is ready for council discussion that would be fruitful and lead us to the point where we can clearly understand what the purpose and what the council specific actions would be by next week. I think there's more work to be done, and I think that we already have a pretty packed agenda. I'm going to be voting no on adding it to the agenda tonight. And because I believe very strongly that there is more work that council members need to do behind the scenes to make sure that they fully understand the legislation that they are proposing that we endorse, that members of the council have chances to review all of the legislation, to understand some of the challenges that may present to the council, that staff have an opportunity to weigh in, especially because they're being explicitly called out, and that we keep focus first and foremost, the people in our community, not that everyone's afraid, and I understand that everyone's afraid, but there are some in our community that are explicitly being targeted, and we need to make sure that we are preserving our energy, our resources, and our time to devote work to those individuals. And so with that, I'm just going to see if there are any other hands or points of discussion. Councilmember Landman.
Yes, thank you. I understand what you're saying, Mayor Searcy, and I would like to respond to several of the points that have been made. First of all, the federal legislation has now been introduced, but nevertheless, whether it had or not, the resolution has been revised to indicate that our key point to our congressional legislators is that we want them to support measures that reduce ICE funding. And it lists the particular measures in question, such as measures like those, and lists their intention to take money away from ICE and spend it on other things. So I don't think that that point that we haven't studied the federal legislation or those particular bills is particularly dispositive here, because the key point is indicating to our congressional delegation that we want them to support legislation to reduce ICE appropriations over last year's over excessive amount, which is going to flood us with ICE and other enforcement officials. And the second point I'd like to make is that I do not agree with the idea that we cannot both chew gum and walk at the same time. I have been devoting a great deal of attention to implementing and taking action on the recommendations that have been made by local activists. And these two things are not, exclusive of one another. Both can be done. We can send a clear signal to the community that we want not only to see these pieces of legislation enacted at a county, state, and federal level, as is provided for in the new draft resolution, but that we want the governor and the county executive to implement rapidly. And so it's not a question only of enactment, where we have taken some initial actions in supporting the legislation through testimony submitted in writing and in person, but also that we want to see follow through to be swift and to be a key focus of the implementing executive branch agencies as well. And finally, I would say that the implication that this is purely performative, I do not appreciate that. It is substantive. Among other things, it is focused on trying to get clarity with respect to how the community is going to interact with the police department and what we want of our police department. And there is something very important that the chief has said in his statement about the role of the police in protecting us against excesses by jackbooted federal agents in our community. And people want clarity as to when and how they can call upon the local police to be present when such things arise or are about to arise because they see ICE coming here. Now, I don't think it's 100% clear because we have not had that community discussion. We haven't had a work session. We have not heard from the community about how that interaction ought to occur. So there is a provision in this draft resolution to create an opportunity for us to perhaps amend the way it's worded now, but to discuss this question of how we want our local police force, whom we trust and want to have present to protect us, how we want that interaction to be. So I do not feel this is purely airy-fairy or performative. It has substantive content, and I would appreciate an opportunity for the community to be heard and for us to be able to interact with them about it. And it is, and I want to again thank the chief for putting out there clearly his intention to provide protection for residents. And I think that needs to be aired more fully. Hence, the revised resolution, which is quite different in having addressed your concerns that you made known last week about having things that were referred to past actions. This also refers to future actions we need to take in interacting with the police department and also with the residents. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you call upon me or?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. Thank you. And thank you, Councilmember Gilbert, for almost seconding. It was quiet, and I didn't know whether anybody was going to second, so I jumped on it. I appreciated the spirit in which you expressed support for this, Councilmember Gilbert, because essentially all we're doing right now is considering whether to put this possibility on an agenda to discuss it in a work session. It's so interesting that it's already in this moment, it's become about the content of the resolution, the draft, and that is something that typically you would discuss in a work session. And I will join in asking that we have a week to have these conversations, knowing that a first work session on this of whatever length of time could be held next week. I do think it is a substantive and not performative draft because it, as Councilmember Lamon said, it moves from sort of a lobbying, pointing out lobbying efforts, which we've already done in other resolutions, to asking for implementation and execution of these types of county, state, or federal measures. The other two resolves, one has to do with committing as a 7-member council to holding a community forum. And we know we've heard residents asking for that kind of unified response. We heard that from Reverend Harper this evening, that sense of information sharing that can be helpful to all parties. And the other element, the idea of trying to fill in our understanding and our clarity about how police will protect our residents and visitors when if an ICE surge materializes. Exactly how is that intervention or monitoring going to be able to happen safely? The draft resolution proposes an idea, but it's understood that I'm not an expert in proposing that idea. We have lots of expertise, and all the ask for right now is, can we discuss this further in a work session?
Councilmember Schlegel, I do just want to first, if you have your hand raised and you've already spoken, if you could please lower your hand. And two, I do just want to stress to people, because I think there's this false narrative that work sessions just occur and they're just placed for discussions for us to just talk about things. There's quite a bit of work that needs to be prepared in order for us to have a fruitful work session. If we are talking about aspects of policing, we need to make sure that our police, our chief is available, that he understands what it is that we're talking about, that he's prepared to provide data. If we are including in a resolution references to federal bills under consideration, county bills under consideration, or state bills under consideration, we need to have the language of every single one of those that we are referencing. We need to make sure that council members have the opportunity to read and understand the nuance of those bills to determine whether or not that is something that they want to include. We need to be able to discuss the actual content of those legislation to determine whether or not it's something we want to include in a resolution that will bind us as a city to the language within them. So again, I just want to stress that if we don't have all of the materials necessary to have that conversation about the referenced federal bills that are being referenced, if we are not prepared to provide clear explanation to our police chief, which I believe our police chief has raised concerns about what was here, but did not have time to fully speak with Councilmember Landman or Councilmember Schlegel to discuss the concerns in the language, then having a work session next week is just not feasible to get all of those things prepared so that everyone has an opportunity to discuss the content of what you're proposing. Councilmember Honzak.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I understand that the request is to get this on the agenda, and yes, we are having a discussion again about this, and it's almost like a mini work session. But my genuine concern is that this, and I just want to echo my experience and mine is newer and shorter than, say, the mayor or I guess Councilmember Dabala, but having gone through at least one of these, and I'm not going to reference the specific one, I've told each of you behind the scenes which one I'm talking about. It has been my experience that something like this will definitely not take a single work session. It would definitely take multiple work sessions, and all the staff time and council time that will go into that is time that we will not be able to spend on what will certainly be a lot of very, very pragmatic issues. And the thing that speaks to me the most, as I've said, I think to Councilmember Schlegel earlier today, one-on-one, is the issue about I think Councilmember Lamlin, you just said, trying to get clarity on how police interact with the public. And I think that gets to the fear, one aspect of the fear that is overlaying our community. Well, it has become extremely clear to me, not only multiple months ago when we had the chance to sit down with our police chief and discuss this specific question, how do you feel about blue on blue situations? How should that be handled? And we've had elaborate discussions about how that system is going. And I think we've navigated it so far very, very well. We can see now what's happening in Minneapolis, but I think that the chief's perspective was made extremely lucid in his statement. And what I would really like to see is us from here knowing clearly what the chief's perspective is, that we allow him to be somewhat nimble, actually, in how he's going to navigate blue on blue situations as we proceed. And I don't want to get into all of that right here, right now, because that is a work session if we wanted to have it. But my vote would be no, we don't have that, because we have been having that behind the scenes in depth. I know all of you, each of you has had that chance to talk to the chief, to talk to our counterparts in the community. And I honestly think we're living in very, very, very fragile and dangerous times for us to be bringing some of these things as though council can make a universal statement about these, and that's going to allow us to be safer. That actually scares me a little bit. And I would like us to, I mean, I love the chief's statement. I hope that it really does allay community fear. I think we should try to get that out there. I think along with the mayor and council statement, I think we should push that out more. I did myself try to push it out again. Maybe I'll put it to the top and try to get that out there even more. And regarding the forum, which maybe is something maybe we should think about the forum as a separate pragmatic step. And it sounds like some of our faith leaders might be interested in that as well. There was a really great forum that was super well attended, as most of you know, at which many of our local politicians, including our mayor, spoke at, all side by side, lined up together as a collective. And I think, why not have another one? But I don't think that comes from a resolution necessarily. So I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Hanson. Councilmember Westlake.
Thank you. I'm going to just try to focus on, for voting about putting this on the agenda. I'm not really in favor of what's in the resolution, because I feel like we've already done that. But I will say, getting a resolution today around noon referencing police rules and general orders, something that I don't think has been discussed with us at all, behind the scenes, yes, maybe, but to get that and expect us to vote tonight to put it on the agenda for next week, I'm not in favor of that. I'm not in favor of that. And it points to this sense that I feel like what's been put out there is, I want stuff that's more fully baked, because if we are going to spend our limited time, it's not for 7 of us to draft a 3-page resolution together at the dais. That is not how I want to spend my time. That's for sure. So I'm not in favor of us adding this to the agenda. I'm very excited about the other things we're going to be talking about, and that's where I want our energies. And I think that if there's other things that we can do, that could be great. And I don't think it needs to be packaged in a big formal resolution that would require a lot of discussion and back and forth and nitpicking. I don't see that being an efficient use of our time in any way. Thank you.
Councilmember Schlegel, I see your hand, but I do recognize that everyone has spoken on the topic. And I just want to see if we can close discussion on this and call the vote.
I have a question that follows from what others have said, because I'm trying to discern. I hear what everyone's saying. I'm trying to discern, are folks saying they don't ever want to have a work session on this? Or are they saying they want more lead time, an appropriate amount of lead time before having a work session on this. That's, I think, a significant question. I'd like to hear my colleagues go on record about that.
Can I respond? Honestly, I would say both. I both think that we need to get more time and better prepared materials if you really want us all to be meaningfully thinking about them and discussing whether or not to vote on it. And also, I don't think it's a good idea, similar to a lot of the comments that Councilmember Honzak made, that I do not think it would be an efficient use of our time. And I do not think of the time we have, it is best used doing that when it could be other things that we're trying to do. So that's my answer.
Thank you, Councilmember Westlake. Councilmember Gilbert.
Just really quick, yeah, I feel the same. I would love to have more conversation about it. It doesn't have to be next week. I understand we have a packed agenda, and to gain some more understanding of it before I say no totally, I would just love an opportunity to talk about it. A public forum of something like Councilmember Honzak mentioned would be awesome. But and I'm not sure when we can fit it in, but I'd love to learn more about some of the legislation and then make more comments about the police aspect of it, because I gave some thought to how it impact the police and the perception of the police if we're asking them to go on calls or everything that they every call that we get about ICE, etc. Just I didn't know we want to talk about it so much tonight, but I was looking forward to having some more discussion about it at some point.
Thank you, Councilmember Gilbert. Councilmember DeBala.
Yeah, I think I was clear before. I would urge informal discussion on those topics, and I would urge us to spend our time doing the things that are in there. So we have a legislative committee meeting Friday. That's a good time to talk about some of the legislation, and including the federal, as far as I'm concerned, and see whether the legislative working group, which is our process, thinks we should comment on some of this stuff, or if it's not ready for prime time. I think we can do another community meeting in partnership with folks without a resolution, etc. You get the idea. I would rather spend my time on doing the things rather than trying to, as much as I appreciate the work that Councilmember Landman and Schlegel have done and the sincerity behind them, the effort here, that's how I would prefer to handle this. We have such limited time as a council. That's how I would like to do it, since you asked.
All right. Okay, Councilmember Honzak.
I think I'll just say I almost exactly echo what DeBala just said, and if that's not clear, feel free to reach out to me, including that I really do appreciate that that even what you put together did take you both a lot of time and probably some people around you, and I do appreciate the spirit in which that was the effort that was put in. So I don't mean to be discouraging in that way. I'm not seeing that this is the right use of our time, unless there were something else that were added to that I felt was more pragmatic. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Schlegel, I would like to close discussion on this and call the vote on the motion.
I want to say, never in my life have I seen such a threat to our democracy and our residents. I don't think this is normal at all. And the fact that we may be about to vote not even to consider a work session on where to go next is kind of appalling to me. So if anybody is willing to change their vote or make a motion that we have a work, even if we schedule it and then we're not ready to go, we could postpone, right? That happens all the time. And it also doesn't have to be decided in one work session. We often have multiple work sessions around things. So this is, I don't mean to be alarmist, but I'm very serious about this. Please, colleagues.
Okay, Councilmember.
Yes. I did not before in any way suggest that this was performative, and turning it around, I think I do not appreciate the suggestion that somehow this is not on the top of my list, or that I don't take it as seriously as you do, or that I'm not doing everything I can to make those practical actions on the ground happen. So I'm going to assume you didn't really mean it that way. That said, I would like to call the vote.
Thank you. Councilmember, there was a motion to call the vote. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Westlake. Given that this is a virtual meeting, the motion that is on the floor is to have the draft resolution on the agenda for next week, February the 4th. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Sorry, I should have been ready for this. Councilmember Landman,
Aye.
Councilmember Dabala,
Sorry, I didn't, yeah, I got it. No.
Councilmember Schlegel,
Yes.
Councilmember Gilbert,
No to next week.
Councilmember Hanzak,
No.
Councilmember Wesselek,
No.
Mayor Searcy.
No. Again, I just want to stress that I appreciate the work that Council Members Landman and Schlegel has put in. I would encourage them to have discussions with their colleagues and with staff on ways in which the resolution that is being proposed could be clarified, materials could be provided in a timely way that aligns with our council norms so that everyone will feel prepared for the vote. And with that, I'm going to move to our last agenda item for this evening, which is the work session code amendment to expand the homeowner property tax credit program.
Madam Mayor, I need a point of order or a point of clarification. I'm not sure what you would call it. You just said that we should consider going back and discussing this further. Is that because at some future point you are willing to consider having a work session on this matter? Because I can't tell from what you've said so far whether you would ever consider it.
Well, I'm going to be 100% candid. The purpose of this resolution is very confusing to me. I do not understand what we're trying to do. It conflates and mixes a number of different things across various levels of government. It conflates actions we've already taken with language from bills that have yet to be proposed. It is just a big list of stuff that it's not really focused. I think that if you were to go back and rethink what you're trying to do so that it is more clearly understandable, not just by me, but other members of council and staff, get the necessary feedback, make sure that all of the materials have been read and are ready to go, and it is something that is clear. Currently it is not clear, and I don't know how else to describe it as other than we're just going to put together everything we think is possibly happening in immigration into a single resolution, and we want you to vote on it. But again, we've closed discussion on this matter, and I really want us to move on to our next work session. So the next,
but you can't insult the work in that way and then expect me to just say absolutely nothing in response. It listed federal, state, county, and local actions, all consistently focused on the same thing. And I don't think it's fair to describe it as conflating or just a hodgepodge of nonsense, which is kind of what you're implying. So I think you—
No, I'm saying that you're referencing bills, federal laws that we don't have the text on. And we have closed discussion on the matter. We are moving to the work session code amendment to expand the homeowner property tax credit program. And with that, I see Councilmember Dabala, I see your hand.
Thank you. So moving on to the next topic. Is why I raised my hands, because I did want to say a couple of words of background before staff does their thing here. There's been efforts on this for some of us have been working on this for a while, for years. We have tried changing the state rules. We have tried budgeting money to reach more home. We've tried more outreach to folks at the local level, so more folks can apply. And the fundamental problem remains the current state limits are too low. In some cases, there are families who get only Social Security and still don't qualify for the $60,000 income. That's pretty crazy. So the county took a step, and I appreciate it, to increase the limits of the eligibilities a little bit, maybe certainly not as much as I would have liked, but that is what we have to work with. And I wanted to just, for those four of you who are new, to just say that having been working on this for several years now, this I think is the best balance of what a small community can do with the staff that we have, versus what I think we would all agree would be higher eligibility so that more folks can get benefit. So I want to also say because I was a little confused about this, even though I've been following this, what doesn't change is the process to apply is going to be the same for residents. It's going to be the same timing, the same form to the state, etc. The city's workload is not going to really change, and the timing of that is not going to really change. It's just that the list will be different because the list of eligible residents will come from the county. So what does change is the eligibilities. They're higher in three ways. And so I won't say any more because it's getting late, and we did discuss this last spring and last November. But I think this is the most efficient way for us, the most effective way for us to provide property tax relief to the hardest hit homeowners that we've got. And I will stop with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Dabala, and thank you for your leadership on this. I know we've worked with trying to change things at the state level. We've worked trying to. There's been a lot of work to try to move this along.
If you want to know the story, ask Laura, ask
Laura.
Delegate Charkoudian. We won't go into tonight.
But so with that, I'm going to turn things over to our city staff to walk through our approach to this homeowner property tax credit program expansion.
Good evening, mayors and councilmen. And I thank you, Councilman Dabala, of giving us the background and the introduction about this homeowners tax credit program.
And thank you for all of your work on this. You've hung in there from the beginning with me on this.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I know it's not my turn.
So yeah, tonight's presentation is about expanding the homeowners credit program and also the city's proposed ordinance amendment to chapter 7.28. Okay. And the purpose of this presentation is simply we can go to the next slide. Is to summarize the proposed expansion of the city's homeowners tax credit program and then outline the key changes to eligibility. And we will also identify critical administrative implications for council consideration. The background of this proposed program is in April 2025, Montgomery County Council unanimously expanded its HOTC supplement program. The City Council then directed staff to align the city's program with the county's expanded eligibility criteria. However, we learned that the state cannot implement the Montgomery County expanded program until fiscal year 2027 because of a missed administrative deadline. Okay. The goal of the program is to broaden and support the housing stability while ensuring an efficient, cost-effective city program. The key changes of this program include a homeowner can now qualify by meeting the following criteria. The first one is the state homeowners tax credit requirement, or the second one is the expanded Montgomery County requirements. The county's expanded criteria for 2026 are first, combined income is changing from 60,000 to 75,000. The net worth is changing from 200,000 to 250,000. The assessed home value limit is changing from 300,000 to 375,000. The idea is to include more homeowners who will be qualified in the expanded program. These county limits include an annual consumer price index adjustment, CPI adjustment. According to the county's finance manager, for FY27, these figures will be increased further based on the CPI calculation. This slide, we are seeing three different charts. The combined income, we can see that it's changing from 60,000 to the expanded program's 75,000. The net worth eligibility is changing from 200,000 to 250,000. The assessed home value is changing from 300,000 to 375,000. So on all levels, there is some changes. The program structure and the fiscal impact. The new calculation mechanism includes program required the city code change to reference the county's supplemental housing tax credit program. In order to accomplish the expansion, the calculation method for the city's supplemental change is changing from 50% of the homeowner's state credit that the city is currently using to 100% of the homeowner's county's supplement. Why does this matter? The city's current supplement is equal to 50% of the state homeowner's tax credit. Beginning fiscal year 27, that is July 1st, 2026, the city's supplement will equal 100% of Montgomery County's supplement. Although the calculation method is changing, the benefit amount for most eligible homeowners is expected to remain approximately the same. This is because the county supplement is typically about 50% of the state credit for many homeowners. Based on how the county formula applies income-based deduction and incorporated the state homeowners tax credit amount. Therefore, to maintain a comparable benefit level, the city rebate calculation must therefore be adjusted to 50% of the state credit to 100% of the county's supplement. What is the fiscal status and timeline of this program? The homeowners tax credit supplement is funded by our general fund. In current year, fiscal year 26 allocation include an additional 135,000 to the current budget, which is doubling the total program budgeted to 270,000. For the FY27 estimate, this allocation will need to be reaffirmed for use in fiscal year 27 due to the state implementation delay. We hope to receive more information from the county by late February or early March. The most important implementation, we require state administration and also council oversight. Free state administration. By matching the county program, the state will process applications and determine eligibility for Tacoma Park resident at no cost. The state is currently charging the county $100,000 to administer this program. Any deviation from the county's program will require the city to establish its own administrative infrastructure, and that will be more costly to run this program for the city. And we also include some council safeguard. The ordinance established a new authority which is section number 7.28.050, that allow the city council to suspend the city's program if future county program changes are determined not to be in the city's best interest. And then we will have an annual council briefing. The staff will provide a summary of any county change, like the CPI adjustment and fiscal year impact during the annual budget process. And here is our recommendation. To ensure the program is administered efficiently and no additional costs, the proposed ordinance aligns the city's supplement with the Montgomery County HODC. There's an automatic update incorporate the CPI adjustment and other county changes. In administration, in maintained process by the state, homeowners will continue to submit the application to the state. And we also have council oversight that include a suspension, power, and annual briefing. And here are the proposed timeline. Tonight, we have the council work session, and we'll have the feedback from the council. On February 11, the first reading of the ordinance. On February 18, we'll have the second reading and also the adoption. July 1st, 2026, which is the first day of fiscal year 27, the program will be implemented. And around April 2027, the city staff will issue rebate checks to the resident depending on the availability of the county information. So this is the timeline that we are going to implement this county program. So I'm open to any questions that you may have. Sorry for the little coughing that I have. I was not feeling well these few days. I'm sorry.
Oh, no need to apologize. Being here and walking us through this, even though you're under the weather. Councilmember Honzak.
Thank you so much, Director Chung. I too am excited to see this homeowner tax credit concept come to fruition. I just want to make sure that I understand one aspect very, very clearly as I attempt to, I probably jumped the gun. I attempted to explain based on the cover sheet and my prior understanding as well to residents in some layman's term, and I want to make sure I didn't screw that up. I could hand it off to you. But the question is this. It is my impression that the vast majority, if not the vast majority of households in the city of Tacoma Park that would fall under the threshold of $375,000 are likely to be condos at this point, just because of, the extreme growth that we've seen in values. Is it actually the taxable value of the entire home and parcel, or is it the first $375,000 of taxable assessed value, of like if it was a higher valued property and you happened to be under those other two categories of $75,000 income and the assets?
The 375 is the assessed value.
The total assessed value of the property.
Total assessed value.
Okay. So then that's probably about right, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Okay.
So based on my experience when processing the tax rebate program, I've seen quite a number of residents. Their assessed value is way over 375, but they still receive the qualification to receive the rebate. So this is something that is provided to us by Montgomery County, and this information is passed from state to us. So I think from the report that I saw, a number of residents, their accessible value could be higher than 375.
So is that because, do you have, and if you don't know the answer, that's fine too. Maybe too early, but so are you saying then that your impression is that those three criteria that you laid out of assets, total income, and the assessed value of the property might be, rather than being and statements, are like or statements?
No, they are
Either this or this or this?
they are and statements. And
Oh, okay.
Director Chung, I believe what she's indicating is that the 375 is the maximum that is included in the formula. So you can have a assessed value over the limit, but it's only up to $375,000 that will be counted as a part of the calculation.
Yes,
So is
that
it,
is correct.
so, okay, so, but it is an and statement, so it's just that one that seems to be more flexible, so that in that case, we'd be talking about, I mean, is it any property then above and beyond
Yeah, so there's no
3.7?
maximum.
I mean, there's no upper boundary on that particular thing is your impression, but there are upper boundaries on the other two criteria, and those are fixed?
You could have a property that's assessed at $1 million, but only 375,000 of that is going to be attributed to the formula. And
Okay,
all the other
okay.
criteria apply.
Okay, so then I was wrong. Just for those of you who are listening to this, I communicated that incorrectly. Councilmember Dabala pointed that out to me as a possible question, and I will correct that in the notes that I sent out to the community. But can I just make sure then that I hear you correctly, that the other two criteria are indeed fixed criteria about income and assets?
Yes,
That
you
if you
can.
have more than that amount of assets or you have more than that amount of joint household income, then you would not qualify.
Right. So those
Right.
are
Okay.
maximum
Okay. Those are
statements.
maximums.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. That is extremely helpful. Sorry, everybody. I just needed to make sure I got that right.
Thank you.
Councilmember Lamb.
Thank you to you and to Mr. Eubanks, but I think now that you have explained that, now I have another question that arose from your explanation. So if your assets include does the value of your home, if your home exceeds assets other than the home?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So the 250K does not include any, like say, equity you have in a home?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lamb and Councilmember Slade.
Sorry. Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Councilmember Dabala, for your advocacy of this. I know you've been interested in this for a long time and continue to be. And thank you, Director Chung, for your explanation and for your work in preparing this. That was very helpful, the question that both the previous questions. I have a much better understanding now, knowing that assets don't include your equity and knowing that your first 375K is addressed here, but that your home might be worth more. My only question is about the 135,000 was allocated in the FY26 budget because of the administrative delay on the part of the state. Is the idea to have those unspent funds allocated forward into the FY27 budget for the same purpose?
It will be. Go ahead, Director John.
Yeah, for FY27, we estimated about the same budget amount, which is going to be 270,000 as well. But we will receive more information from the county around February and March to see if there are the increases in the CPI could change that amount to be a higher amount.
Thank you. Okay.
Great. Well, I just want to say thank you, Director Chung and Deputy City Manager Eubanks for you all's work on this. I know when it came up and we had testified before the Montgomery County Council on it, and it came up and we said, as the county was implementing quite quickly, dare I say, the question was, what happens if this thing got to a point where they made certain adjustments that could potentially be unaffordable for the city? So I appreciate the fact that you all took some extra time to work through making sure that we had some language that would provide us in the code that would provide us with a stopgap measure and a check-in point, so that if should there ever come a time when things kind of our budget doesn't allow for the increase that the county's budget can allow, that we ultimately have an opportunity to assess whether or not that's occurring and kind of putting appropriate mechanisms in place in case we need to pivot. So thank you. I know that took some extra time, but I appreciate you all thinking through it.
Thank you.
Hey, any other points of discussion on this item? Okay, seeing no hands. And so there will be, I'm trying to bring up my rolling agenda again to confirm. All right. So this item will come back to the council on February the 11th for a vote.
Yes.
So if you have any questions or need any points of clarification, please reach out to Director. How do you, Deputy City Manager Eubanks, how would you like to handle questions? Would you like them to come to you or directly to Director Chung?
You can send them directly to me, that's fine.
Okay. Any questions on this item, please send them to Deputy City Manager Eubanks, and he will work with Director Chung to get them answered for you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Feel better.
Thank you. I will. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, that is the end of tonight's meeting. Thank you all so much. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Westlake. Do I have a second?
Seconded, with gratitude to my colleagues for a good discussion.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Schlegel, for seconding. All those in favor of calling it a night, say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Stay
Everyone
warm.
have a fantastic night.